in the last 50 years.
I call the honourable member Julianne Genta. Tēnā koe.
Mr. Speaker, tēnā koe, Mr. Speaker, tēnā koutou te whare. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge that the budget is about choices. All government policy and spending makes trade-offs that reflect its priorities. And this government has some very clear priorities. It likes to pretend that any criticism of these priorities is simply saying no, full stop. But that is not the case. The government has, in choosing its priorities, said no to many sound, sensible policies that would lead us to develop a smart green economy that works for all New Zealanders. And my question to this government is why isn't the government prioritising a smart green economy that works for all New Zealanders? John Key and Stephen Joyce are not governing in the interests of all New Zealanders or the wider New Zealand economy. In fact, they are mismanaging the economy and blaming the global financial crisis. It started several years ago with tax cuts that largely benefited top income earners, which cost billions and contributed to growing the deficit. Now the government is using the government debt as an excuse to sell off public assets. And this is another example of a wealth transfer from all New Zealanders to just a few. Most likely, the sell-off is going to result in large amounts of foreign ownership of our strategic energy companies. And it will, according to Treasury's own numbers, leave the government books worse off. Instead of looking after our clean green brand, John Key and Stephen Joyce and their Nat buddies have said no to investing in clean technology and harnessing the power of our public energy SOEs to develop green jobs that would allow New Zealand to respond to growing global demand, to respond to climate change, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. This was a proposal that the Green Party put forward before the last election, but the government would rather say no to creating green jobs and sell off our public assets, which won't even leave the New Zealand government books better off, but it will enrich their mates, the top income earners who have the spare cash to buy shares in these companies. They're not looking after all New Zealanders or our clean green brand, but they are happy to lay out the red carpet for big international mining and drilling companies by offering tax breaks, tens of millions of dollars in free research, maintaining low royalty regimes, and refusing to put in place decent protection of our coasts in case of a catastrophic spill resulting from risky deep-sea drilling. The mining and oil drilling business will create very few jobs for New Zealanders, and it certainly won't make us more wealthy. But it will put our clean green brand at threat, drilling and fracking will worsen climate change, and it will actually undermine our transition to a clean green economy that works for all New Zealanders. This is a government that claims to be about building a competitive economy when action after action show that they are systematically protecting their mates from having to compete, like Sky City and Fletcher's and the private bus companies. Any economist can tell you what is good for private monopolies is not good for the economy. Finally, if I can get to rebalancing the economy, the budget policy statement clearly shows the account deficit worsening. It's going to be much worse, according to Treasury's forecasts, in 2017 than it is actually in 2013. And there are at least two government policies that are directly contributing to the worsening of the current account deficit. Firstly, this government's high dollar policy, which is effectively killing off our manufacturing sector and reducing the number of good jobs for New Zealanders. Secondly, their insane transport policy. Now, they talk a lot. This government talks a lot about investing in infrastructure. What is clear is they are building big motorways that have no business case. We know from NZTA's own numbers that these projects are not going to result in any economic benefit over the cost. Here, there's this opportunity to apply rational economic theory to transport and actually get better outcomes. Do we see this government pursuing rational economic policy when it comes to transport?
Order, order. Can I just remind the member on my right that backbench interjections on each other in close proximity to each other, which is the crossbenches, actually have an effect on the microphones, and the member is out of order. Speaker's ruling 63(1). I call the Honourable Member Julianne Genter.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Point of order, the Honourable Tohanari.
Mr Speaker, I'm on your right, and it wasn't me.
I'm well aware of that, Mr Hanari, and I did not use any names. One could say me think himself does protest too much, but I won't. I call the Honourable Member Julianne Genter.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. This government's transport policy is not backed up by rational economic analysis, and unfortunately it's not even going to benefit road users, it's not going to benefit the economy, it's just going to benefit their mates at Fletcher's. So once again, we see that this government is about protecting its mates from having to compete. It's about creating, shifting wealth from all New Zealanders to just a few, and we're certainly not going to see a transition to the clean green economy that works for all New Zealanders that the Green Party is working towards. Thank you, Mr Speaker.
I call the Honourable Member Maggie Barry.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'm very proud to rise to take a call on the budget.